Star Trek, the animated series' canon status explained. When it comes to the Star Trek franchise, few topics ignite more passionate debates among fans than the question of canon, the official continuity of the Star Trek universe. And within that debate, Star Trek, the animated series TAS, which aired from 1973 to 1974, occupies a uniquely contested space. Was it a legitimate continuation of the original series TOS? Or is it just a curious 1970s Saturday morning footnote? Over the decades, TAS has drifted in and out of official status, but its impact on Star Trek storytelling is undeniable. To understand TAS's canon status, we have to look at its origins, how later Trek creators treated it, and why modern Star Trek seems to have found a surprising middle ground between ignoring it and fully embracing it. The origins of the animated series. Star Trek, the animated series, was born out of necessity and opportunity. NBC canceled the original series in 1969, but the show's popularity exploded in syndication. By the early 1970s, Star Trek conventions were drawing thousands of attendees, and Paramount recognized that there was still an eager audience. However, producing a live-action continuation was too expensive at the time. Enter Filmation, an animation studio known for shows like Fat Albert and The Cosby Kids. Gene Roddenberry agreed to produce a Saturday morning Star Trek cartoon with Filmation, reuniting most of the original cast: William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, and Majel Barrett, who all reprised their roles. Though designed for children, the series aimed higher than typical Saturday morning fare. The writers included original Trek veterans like D.C. Fontana and David Gerrold, and the stories often mirrored the moral and philosophical tone of TOS. TAS even won Star Trek's first Emmy Award for Outstanding Entertainment Children's Series in 1975. The Roddenberry rule: TAS is not canon. For a brief period in the late 1970s and early 1980s, TAS was considered an official continuation of TOS. But by the time Star Trek: The Next Generation launched in 1987, Gene Roddenberry had changed his stance. He declared that TAS was not part of official Star Trek continuity. Roddenberry's reasoning was partly pragmatic. TAS's half-hour format, simplified animation, and sometimes fantastical storytelling, giant clones, talking plants, pink tribbles, didn't align with the more grounded tone he wanted for modern Trek. There were also licensing and production differences. Filmation technically held certain rights related to the series, complicating its integration into new Trek productions. From that point on, the official stance from Paramount was clear: TAS was a fun curiosity, but anything introduced in it didn't count in the official Star Trek timeline. The fan pushback. Fans, of course, didn't accept this quietly. TAS wasn't just a novelty, it gave them new Star Trek adventures during the long drought before the movies and TNG. The series also expanded Trek in important ways. First, Holodeck. The episode The Practical Joker introduced the Rec Room, essentially an early holodeck, predating TNG by over a decade. First Captain Robert April. TAS named the Enterprise's first captain before Kirk, giving fans an important historical figure in Starfleet lore. Expanded Alien Crew. The animation allowed for non-humanoid characters like the feline LT, Mress, and the three-armed, three-legged LT-RX. Character depth. Episodes like Yesteryear delved into Spock's childhood on Vulcan, a story so compelling that it was later adapted into TOS novelizations and referenced in other Trek media. Many of these ideas were so rich that they began sneaking back into the franchise through novels, comics, and even passing references in live-action Trek. The quiet return to semi-canon. By the early 2000s, TAS began creeping back toward semi-official recognition. The tipping point came with Star Trek: Enterprise. In 2004, the episode Yesteryear from TAS was referenced directly in the Enterprise episode The Forge, which revisited Spock's childhood. Other nods followed. Vulcan's giant Celet pet, introduced in TAS, became canon in live action. Then came the digital age. When CBS remastered Star Trek for streaming, TAS was included alongside other Trek series in official collections. The official Star Trek website even listed TAS episodes in its timeline, albeit with a small asterisk about its original non-canon designation. The Kelvin timeline and the Discovery era boost. The Kelvin timeline films and modern series like Discovery and Strange New Worlds have embraced TAS with a wink and a smile. They don't treat it as fully canonical in the same sense as TOS or TNG, but they freely borrow from it when it suits them. For example, Star Trek Lower Decks openly references TAS characters like Mress and RX, fully integrating them into modern Starfleet lore. Star Trek Prodigy features a Cation Starfleet officer, an obvious homage to Mress. Strange New Worlds Season 2 included a visual Easter egg of the animated TOS crew in the background during a comedic crossover with Lower Decks. The giant Spock clone from TAS's The Infinite Vulcan was hilariously canonized as Spock 2 in Lower Decks. These references aren't just jokes, they're a recognition that TAS, while once written off, has become part of the shared cultural memory of Star Trek. Canon versus canon adjacent. So where does TAS stand today? The most accurate description might be canon adjacent. It's not treated as strictly authoritative. Some events contradict later live-action material, and certain episodes lean too far into cartoon logic to fit seamlessly into the timeline. But it's also not ignored. When creators want to draw from TAS, they simply adapt elements into modern continuity. Think of it like Star Wars Legends, a source of ideas that can be cherry-picked and reimagined for new audiences. Why TAS still matters to Star Trek's legacy. Whether or not TAS is officially canon matters less than the fact that it kept Star Trek alive during a vulnerable time. Without it, the gap between 1969 and the motion picture in 1979 would have been a true drought, risking the fading of the franchise. TAS kept the crew of the Enterprise in the public imagination, introduced concepts that enriched the universe, and showed that Star Trek could exist in different formats. It also quietly proved that Star Trek could appeal to younger viewers without losing its heart, a lesson that paved the way for family-friendly Trek projects like Prodigy. The final word on TAS canon status. Today, the official stance from Paramount is that TAS is part of the broader Star Trek franchise and can be considered canon unless contradicted by live-action series or films. This middle ground position keeps TAS available for reference without forcing modern Trek to account for every fantastical plot point from the 1970s. That means yesteryear is canon until something overwrites it. Mress and RX are canon characters when they show up in Lower Decks, and the holodeck's first appearance is part of Starfleet history if you accept it. In other words, TAS occupies a rare and special niche. It's not an official pillar of the timeline, but it's no longer the forgotten stepchild of Star Trek either. It's a treasure chest of lore, ready to be opened whenever modern Trek needs something both nostalgic and new. Why the debate will never truly end. Star Trek fandom thrives on discussion, and canon debates are part of its DNA. For some, canon is a rigid, sacred structure that must be preserved for narrative consistency. For others, it's a flexible glue